I'm Tamara, and this is TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. We're bringing together experts, thinkers, and leaders, busting myths, sharing stories, and staying connected when Canadians need it the most. We're having unexpected conversations for unprecedented times. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Today we are talking to David France. David is an Oscar-nominated filmmaker. He is an award-winning author and investigative journalist, and he is a filmmaker. His latest film is called Welcome to Chechnya. Hi, David. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you, Tamara. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you. This is a film that I'm pretty comfortable saying every single person should see. I'm not often speechless, but this film has left me really thinking about a lot of things. So maybe I think it's best for you to describe the film instead of me trying to describe the film. Do you mind doing that for us?
This film, Welcome to Chechnya, is about an ongoing human rights atrocity of a kind that we haven't heard of since Hitler. There is a regional ruler in the south of Russia, in the Republic of Chechnya, who has ordered a government-sanctioned, top-down, systematic campaign to round up, torture, and forcibly disappear all members of the LGBTQ community there. It was first revealed by an investigative reporter inside Russia in early 2017, the reporter Elena Malashina, who produced an investigative piece that really exposed this for the very first time. And there was a period where governments around the world expressed alarm and horror at this campaign that's going on there. But in this political, noisy environment we find ourselves in, that fell from headlines very quickly. And what I learned later that summer from another article, this time in the New Yorker, was that it was still ongoing and that the political backlash was so meager that it was allowed to go with impunity, leaving the responsibility to the local Russians to try and find a way to not to stop this, because you can't stop something that the government is endorsing, or at least with silence allowing to continue, but to try and save lives. So one by one, they've been rescuing people and moving them through a hidden network of underground safe houses, getting them to more relative safety in other countries. That's the story that when I heard it, I realized I needed to go and document it. And for 18 months, I filmed inside that safe house network to chronicle the work of these extraordinary people who have taken on such incredible risk, personal peril, to save what is now amounted to hundreds of lives.
There's so much I want to talk to you about. The Olga, she's a mother. She is just, there's something about Olga that I really connected with. She is so strong, and so she appears so bold to me. And so when I look at her, I feel safe. I can see how others that she's helping would feel safe with her. And then you see her little boy. And, she's driving to the airport to try to save someone. And her boy is phoning her. And I mean, it's just this realness, the way that you were able to film. It brings you in to who these people are and just how much is at risk for everybody. This isn't some kind of Hollywood movie. These are real people, real stories. And just the footage you got, what did you shoot on? Like, how did you do this? where did you live? I have so many questions about how you made this happen.
Well, you're talking about Olga Baranova, who is one of those activists who I met, the first one that I reached out to. She works for an organization called the Moscow Community Center for LGBT plus Initiatives. What that has meant for her personally over the years is that she organized an arts festival, some film screenings, discussion groups. She created a safe space for queer choirs to practice and come together. She had no reason to believe that she would ever have to take on this kind of superhero kind of work. And yet, when no one else was doing it and people reached out to her and to the Russian LGBT network, a national group there, for help, she couldn't say no. And she really put her life on the line to try and help, to really do things that she had never done before. Not only setting up a secret network of shelters, but also bringing people to the shelters who had suffered such an unspeakable traumas, who had been beaten to within an inch of their lives, and to try and nurse them back to health, to not just feed them, but to get them medical care and psychiatric care, and then to work with partners to find back channel visas to countries in the West, especially Canada, by the way, which has been the leading beacon of hope for people who are fleeing this campaign there in Chechnya. And she invited me to come into the system and experience what she was experiencing, to see the world through her eyes. And we promised that we would film in a way that wouldn't add to her dangers. And that meant we were not using professional film crews in any way. The majority of the scenes that we filmed inside the shelter are filmed on a little tourist video camera that is not at all professional. It's consumer level camera, plus cell phones. And when we were shooting in public with her, if she were doing something that required her to leave the shelter, as you mentioned, one scene where she realizes that they're about to lose one of the people that they're trying to get out of the country, who had been intercepted in an airport where they had a layover. And we shot that with cell phones and with other hidden cameras, making sure that she could do her work and we could witness it without drawing any further attention to what was going on.
Mm-hmm. I think when watching the film, and again, I'll be honest with you, David, I've never really thought about Chechnya before. I mean, obviously I'm aware of the country but I've never really, I had no plans to visit there and never really thought about anything. We, live our busy lives. And this, the leader, if you will, I mean, when he was being interviewed and people were questioning him, the reporter was questioning him on what was happening, and his response. I mean, it's hard for someone like me who has, grown up in Vancouver, where, we have a very vibrant gay village, and it's just, for me, I'm speaking personally, has been, just an accepting and wonderful thing. So to see this complete opposite, horrific, I mean, gay people are treated like subhuman in this country. Mm-hmm. And it was the and all of it, you listen to people's stories, David, and you think, okay, well, wow, this sounds really awful. How could this possibly be true? And then you insert intercepted video. And it's the intercepted video that I actually had to turn away from. And it's the sound. It's how did they get these videos and maybe you can talk a little bit about these videos that are intercepted and why they're important to see.
After the news broke about what was happening there, Ramzan Kadyrov, who's the leader of Chechnya, just denied that it was happening. And as you point out, he does it in a way that makes him really look like a cartoon villain. He strokes his beard and he says, "We wouldn't even have such people in the Republic. It wouldn't be possible for the Chechen people to produce LGBTQ relatives. And if they did, we would have to cleanse our blood of them." He says that quite openly. Chechnya is not a country in its own right. It's a republic, part of the Russian Federation. It is subject to all Russian laws. And yet, in practice, the Russian legal system does not enforce those laws there. It's a very isolated part of Russia. It's in the far south. It's in the mountains, in the Caucasus region of the south, and it's a lawless place. And Vladimir Putin has echoed the denials that anything is happening there against the community. They all say, well, there's no evidence of it. And what we discovered was that indeed there is evidence, and that evidence is gathered by the people who are doing the perpetration themselves. The state actors in Chechnya record the tortures, routinely record the crimes that they're committing, and they share them among themselves. They share them as trophy videos, kind of gleefully passed around on social media. They send them up to their authorities, their superiors, as proof that they're carrying out what's expected of them. And when we discovered that we could find some of that evidence, I felt it was important to include it as a way to say, look, these denials are so false that even you can see them doing it in the footage, which they themselves recorded. All the while I was filming this story and in the safe houses with the people who survived this torture, I knew that the images that bounced around in their minds about what happened to them were reflected so purely in those purloined and intercepted videos that was the hot breath of Kadyrov and his regime on their neck. And it was important for me to let you know, as you're watching the film, what it is they're fleeing. This is not a matter of simple discrimination. This is a matter of brutal, brutal violence of the most medieval sort. And it was with the work of, with the help of the organization, the Russian LGBT Network, that we were able to find and get hold of those videos and present them in this way, this undeniable way that shows the world what's going on there.
Mm-hmm. It is brutal. It's unimaginable. And I think that without seeing those, as hard as they are to see in your film, you're right. It's a reminder to our privileged lives that this is what's happening every day, right now, in this republic. Did you feel safe when you were there?
You know, certainly when I was in Chechnya, I felt a kind of the heaviness of a brutal totalitarianism. You feel it in every breath you take when you're there. What I was concerned about in the entire documentation project was less for my own safety than for the safety of the people who we were helping, because that would, if discovered, that would be certain death for them. And I felt that I carried a certain privilege with me that would give me some form of protection. I also made sure I had legal representation just in case, and that my movement was being monitored the entire time I was there, from both myself and from my crew, and that we had anticipated all possible awful outcomes and had in place a response ready to mount in case we needed it. But mostly, I really feared for the young people. They were mostly young people who the activists they're actually going into Chechnya to save in a hand-by-hand rescue mission that is just incredibly harrowing. It's incredibly courageous. But as Russians, they are taking very serious risks. And they're doing it because no one else is doing it. I mean, Tamara, like nobody else is doing this. No one is stopping this man. There are an estimated 40,000 LGBTQ people still living in Chechnya, living in plain sight, hiding in plain sight, hoping that their truths won't be discovered. So the work that the activists are doing on a one by one basis is only saving the few people that they're able to reach. The problem is so huge there. And the silence, the global silence around it is outrageous. And I hope the film will do something to end the silence. And that's the reason why they invited me and my camera to accompany them on these incredibly dangerous missions.
I just saw that the U.S. government has announced sanctions on Chechnya. Do you think your film had, not only your film, but your film and the articles that inspired your film, do you think that, it's starting to tip and people are starting to take notice?
Well, that's what we hope with the film, right? We hope that we bring this reality back to the political discourse. And we're doing it very programmatically. We did a screening on Capitol Hill in Washington last Friday, hosted by the Canadian Embassy in Washington. And it was well attended and very powerful conversation afterwards with lawmakers and policymakers in Washington. And literally the next Monday, yesterday, the U.S. State Department finally, after 3 years, issued a series of sanctions against Ramzan Kadyrov and his family and his senior leadership in Chechnya, specifically citing the brutality and a campaign of terror and murder against the LGBTQ community. So if the film played a part in helping bring that about, I would be very grateful. But what I know is that we're amplifying the voices of the people who have already been on the ground, already been organizing with the U.S. State Department, with your government and governments across the world to keep this issue center stage.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So Grisha in the film, Grisha is Russian, and he went to Chechnya to work and was abducted and tortured, and I think for 2 weeks. And got out, and his partner Bogdan. When you were filming, and then everybody needs to see this film. So Grishna's entire family was being moved. Like this is not like his mother, his elderly mother, and his sister. The pain on his sister's face throughout this film, the pain on Grisha's boyfriend's face. There are no words that are needed when it's just the camera focusing in on their face, and when Grisha is talking about how he was tortured. I mean, it is so moving and upsetting, and what can we do, David? What can, somebody like me that watches this film and just feels so heavy, and I know this is unacceptable. We all know this. What can we do is there anything that we can do way over here in Canada or the US or wherever we may be?
Well, you mentioned Grisha. He was indeed just a visiting worker in Chechnya. Chechnya is a very closed part of Russia. It's isolated geographically and culturally. It has its own language. It has about 1.4 million people who live there. And it's not uncommon for Russians to live and work there. I mean, people of Russian ethnic extraction, like Grisha. And he was swept up in this campaign. When it was determined that he was not Chechen, the idea of it being a blood cleansing limited it and saved him in a way. It allowed him to be released. But once they released him, they came to the conclusion that they had made a mistake, that if he went back to his family in the north, that he might talk about what was happening there, and this might become a larger problem. And they began to pursue not only him, but all of his relatives, trying to force him to come back so that they could silence him for good. And he realized that there was no way for him to find safety in Russia. And his family realized the same thing. So suddenly, this extraction campaign that the activists have set up and built for people who are fleeing from Chechnya had to find room and space to allow the entire family to move. Mm-hmm. And they got them out of the country, dislocating his mother, his sister, his nieces and nephews, and his boyfriend. And they all moved to somewhere in Europe, hoping that they could be safer there. But they knew that they were being pursued. And Grisha did something that no one else has done to date.
Mm-hmm.
Grisha decided that he was going to lodge a formal criminal complaint against his abductors and torturers and the leadership, in fact, of the Republic of Chechnya. And to watch him and his family come to that courageous juncture and make that move, which has brought this story about what's happening in Chechnya to a much larger audience. It's really increased the peril on all of them, and you see that in the film. You see what it's done to them to be chased, to be hunted like this.
Hunted is the word.
They're being hunted, and they're still being hunted. I just spoke with Grisha only 30 minutes ago.
Oh, wow.
And he is still in hiding. And here's a man in his very young 30s who has no real expectation for a normal life until we can bring justice to his case, until we can stop this murderous regime from its campaigns, until we can organize the international community into some sort of a response that demands an end to this and demands safety for people who are talking about what happened to them.
He is incredibly brave, and his family, and it's, why for him to step forward and say, this is what I'm going to do, knowing that if it goes wrong, which there's a very good chance it could, he will end up dead, and his entire family could end up dead.
Unfortunately, those are the stakes in today's world, in the 21st century.
It's hard to imagine.
Merely because he's willing to talk about the brutality that is being visited, not just against him. He's not doing this for himself. He's doing this for the rest of the people who are still there. This is an act of true generosity, of true heroism, really, to take the heat, to take the risk, to side with truth, which is what he's done.
Mm-hmm. And I think that you can really, when you watch the film, you can see it in his face. You can, and that's what I mean. It's the footage that you got on your tourist camera and your phones, and is so. I mean, David, I know I'm really praising you a lot here, but it's because you have done such a fabulous job, you and your team, of there are no words sometimes that are needed, right? When you see the pain, the lived pain on people's faces.
I've insert here that the most of that footage was shot by Askol Kurov, who is my Russian producer. He's just a tremendous filmmaker in his own right, a well-known dissident filmmaker in Russia. And he really understood the emotional power of seeing people experiencing this horror, and he helped me create this, visceral report about these things that are happening that no one has seen. Mm-hmm. And it's thanks to his work that you're able to connect to those people in the way that you do.
Yeah, and I mean, you're wonderful storytelling as a journalist. I always say that if we can make enough people feel something, that's how we create change. And so it's a matter of, people watching there's no way somebody could watch this film and not feel something and not want to be a part of the solution. So again, it's, how do we do that? How do we help the 40,000 people in Chechnya?
I'll tell you what the activists have asked for. There are 2 organizations on the ground in Russia that are doing this work. They need you to join them. They need us all to join them, to help them, to find out what they're doing, find ways that we can support what they're doing. And you can learn more about them and how to do that on the welcometochechnya.com website. Grisha, the person who came forward and claimed his story, the only one who's done that in a legal way. He also reclaimed his real name, which is Maxim Lapunov. And and his case needs our attention and our support. But what we can do as individuals is just counter the narrative that this isn't happening. And Grisha Maxim has asked us to use the hashtag I am a witness and just let the people know in Russia that the number of witnesses is multiplying exponentially, that we are seeing what they're telling us doesn't exist, and keep talking about it among ourselves and our friends and our circles of influence. And then to turn to our governments and say, many of the people in leadership in the West did respond generously in the first months of the revelation around this crime against humanity. But that willingness to continue helping out, continue issuing safe passage visas, humanitarian visas, to continue inviting survivors of this Chechen atrocity to come and find a better place somewhere else, that has waned. I started out by saying that Ottawa was in the forefront of inviting people into the country from Chechnya, and now activists are saying it's more difficult to get those visas from the Canadian authorities. And write to your representatives. Tell them we need to continue doing this work. Tell them that they alone, in many instances, stand between these LGBT people, ordinary people in Chechnya, and certain death.
Yes.
And so put pressure on our governments to put pressure on their governments. Put pressure on our governments to open up these visa opportunities. Put pressure on people we know in our world to talk about this, to learn about this, to support the work that's being done on the ground.
Do you think the pandemic has made this more challenging?
I know that it's been more difficult to move people across borders. Borders are closed in many parts of the world, starting to open now in some of those parts, although not to U.S. citizens. We have found ourselves to be viral outlaws around the globe with good reason. But it's also made things much more difficult, even within Russia, to move people across, the borders of provinces and states and republics within the Russian Federation, because policies are local and regional that involve lockdowns and travel restrictions. So there are people I know now, as you and I speak here, that there are people who are in desperate need of help getting out of Chechnya, and there are activists who are in touch with them every day, trying to find ways to circumvent the travel restrictions in the country. People who are attempting on land self-extractions, if you will, through the forest, through the mountains, stuff that you couldn't imagine we'd be talking about today, stuff that was right out of the history books from World War II. And the pandemic has only made things worse.
Well, I asked that too, because in the film with Anya, who she was told that her uncle found out she was a lesbian, and she was told that her uncle said, you can have sex with me and I'll keep your secret, or not. And we know how that will end. People like Anya would then be, in a pandemic, forced to stay with, their families. But this is a place where even your family will kill you. This is not, your family. I'm sure in some cases, maybe your family wouldn't kill you. But I mean, for the most part, this is a horrible, nobody's keeping the secret, and they will kill you in order to, I guess, not have the shame of this and to protect themselves. I don't know. So when you have a group of people who are being forced to live with the people that they know will kill them if they find out their secret, is just something that is very hard to comprehend.
It's the family's job to kill them. That is what Ramzan Kadyrov has ordered. After the discovery that the security forces were doing this dirty work on their own, they regionalized the response. They said that it is the obligation of Chechen families to rout out queer Chechens, to carry out so-called honor killings. And they have promised that there will be no prosecution of such crimes. But more importantly, they have put individual police pressure on family members of known queer people to carry out this ultimate order. And they bring them in on a regular basis, brothers, fathers, cousins, uncles, and they are made to account for why they have not yet done this. And then if another week passes, another interrogation of that sort will take place. And the family members are large enough, and in this kind of a clan-based society, that it is likely that someone in that family will respond to those instructions. And those are the real risks right now to people on the ground in Chechnya, that any hint of discovery brings on this massive campaign to hunt you down, even within the country. And there's, no matter how much your own immediate family might want to protect you, that you are subject to this broader campaign against your broader bloodline. And that's why we've seen people, even once they leave Chechnya, even once the activists get them out to Toronto and Vancouver and Paris and Oslo and Berlin and elsewhere, the vast diaspora of Chechens around the world still poses a risk. So people find themselves not at all comfortable, even once they get to places where you and I would think that they would be totally comfortable. And we've seen, really, in the last 6 months or 9 months, we've seen the reach of Chechen terror. We've seen assassinations, not against LGBTQ people, but against enemies of Ramzan Kadyrov himself. And we have seen campaigns to hunt down and find LGBT asylum seekers and refugees in other countries and try and force them to return so that their families can carry out these diabolical acts.
It's you've mentioned a couple of times the bloodline, and this is and you referred to Hitler off the top, that we haven't seen anything like this. What's happening in Chechnya, and he even says this, and you just brought it up again, and because I'm trying to understand what is it about LGBTQ that is it, like, did this just come out of nowhere for him, or is this just something he dreamed up, or where did this seed start for him? He's not a very old guy, is he, either?
No, he's not, except he's got a very old world kind of backwardness to his worldviews. But this isn't coming from him. This is coming from Putin. This is coming from the Kremlin. This is coming from the very top. And we have watched over the last 10 years that as Putin has taken Russia in a cultural reverse, and he has fomented an anti-queer bigotry in the country in a way that, like culture wars run by right-wing personalities like him elsewhere in the world have discovered, that you can run a culture war like this against the community and use it as a way to scare people into supporting or enabling your regime. He started it in 2011, 2012, as he was coming back to power for the first time. He cemented his re-election campaign on a referendum that passed in Russia that makes it now illegal for anybody to say in public anything in defense of LGBTQ rights, because of the fear that it might contaminate the young minds of young Russians. So it's actually a criminal offense. There are prosecutions. There are people who, if they are queer and have children, have lost their children because their very presence in the family argues for what they call gay propaganda. And he just did it again. He's just, on this recent referendum from early this month, from July 1st, he passed a national referendum that codifies the Russian constitution to say that marriage will be denied for same-sex couples. And he used that once again to further cement his power and become, as the newspaper opinion writers say, president for life. We will see him around for the next 16 years at the very minimum. So he's been running this this campaign of bigotry and hatred, and it's carried out throughout the Federation in different ways. And Kadyrov uses it as license to take it to the extreme. So it's not he's not the architect of this. He's only the madman who's interpreted it in the way madmen do. Right,
which is so hard to comprehend, obviously. So when you talk about Putin like this and in Russia, but I look at what these activists are doing who live in Moscow, and it brings us right back to the beginning of this conversation when we talked about how these activists are risking everything. So if they get caught doing what they're doing, or if they, what happens to them? What happens to, is it a Steve? Is that Steve?
Yes, David is Steve. Yeah.
David, yes. So what happens to somebody like David? Oh my gosh, his face and his expression and his I mean, he just at the drop of a hat, he's on a plane and going to save somebody. I don't understand how is he paying his bills? Like, I always look at I'm like, how are these people living their lives and doing this terrifying work? I mean, important work, but their lives are on the line every day too.
Absolutely. The first question I had for them was like, why? Like, why are you doing this? Or who are you? Like, do you come out of like the spy agencies? Do you come out of, where do you come from? And they're all just ordinary Russians who felt the personal responsibility to do something. I mean, David was trained as a journalist. He had worked covering international politics in Russia. He was not trained to do, to live in the shadows, to travel at night as he does now, to respond in these heroic ways. And there's just something in him, something in his soul that responded to the call, that converted his entire life. Like, nothing about the life that he had before is ever available to him ever again now. He is a man banished to the shadows. And in the shadows, he's doing this extraordinary work at great physical peril. Sponsored by this campaign in Chechnya, a shadowy organization in the country has issued a hit list, a death list, a kill list of people who are doing this work on the ground. And David's name is on the kill list. Grisha's name is on the kill list. Already one person, a young woman from St. Petersburg, has been murdered from this list. They are living an extraordinarily untenable life to do the work that they do. You see in the film one person who did get discovered, and she found herself also having to take a night flight out of Russia for the last time to leave her homeland with her family to go to safety. And yet there's David, Steve, and his colleagues and comrades still today doing this work, still today living in an ever-changing series of apartments and homes, traveling by night, keeping themselves from detection so that they can continue to respond to the calls to the hotline for these urgent interventions that they're staging still to this day.
I think that the singer, the popular singer in Chechnya,
Zelim Bakayev.
Yes. And so it is an extraordinary example how it's not just people that, that nobody knows, that are living at home and they just disappear one day. This young man was a superstar and he has disappeared. Disappeared.
Presumed dead now, declared dead by the government, although they have not produced a body. but he was part of the cultural, uh, leadership in Chechnya, and it's a region, a republic, a people that celebrate traditional culture. He's a traditional singer, but many of them have been rounded up, and we know of people who are have disappeared, who were in the arts, who ran arts organizations, who were recognizable cultural leaders in the republic, who have been also likewise vanished, the way Zelim has vanished. Zelim got a lot of international attention when he first disappeared, thanks in part to his presence on Instagram. So we could know him that way. We could hear his music. We could hear him talk about his music in Russian or Chechen. And since his disappearance became an international crisis point, there has been a concerted effort to remove him from the internet, to take down his music, to disassociate with him. His publisher no longer claims him. His record label no longer claims him. And we included his story in the film because when we saw his online presence vanishing, we did everything we could to grab everything we could find and to archive it, to make sure that there was evidence, if not of his death, at least of his life. Mm-hmm. He lived. He was a beautiful performer. Mm-hmm. He was a magnificent human being, and now he's gone.
And it's so much like erasing him after his. It's yeah. Well, I mean, because of your film, I now know who he is. And
I wish we could bring more of him back to life. I wish we could bring his music back. He was such a beautiful performer and with such incredible emotional energy that he shared with his audiences. Mm-hmm. Very young man in his 20s and now vanished.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What, David, as we celebrate Pride in North America, what are some things that we should keep in mind when we're celebrating Pride and when we're, so that we can be a part of the solution to the atrocities that are happening still in this world?
I think we need to remember that we came to Pride through rioting, through revolution, through standing up to power, that it was something that we claimed and we fought for and we won, but it's something that we don't have permanent ownership on, that it can be taken away. That our gains, and we've seen this even in the United States, our gains can be reversed. And we're seeing it in Europe. We see it in the recent election in Poland. We see it in Hungary. We see it in over 70 countries in the world where it's still against the law to be queer. There is a political fight that we can never be complacent about. Pride requires us to do whatever we can to hold our ground and to speak up in defense of the people who haven't yet made the progress that we've made.
Mm-hmm. And how do you feel about, where we are in North America when it comes to gay rights, when it comes to safety, when it comes to policies?
Well, I think that depends on what country you're in.
Yes, true. Okay, it's very different between Canada and the U.S. right now, isn't it?
It is totally different. We just had a case go to the Supreme Court about whether or not queer people have a right to employment guaranteed by the Constitution. The Trump administration argued against it. They lamented the ruling when it came down 2 or 3 weeks ago, the ruling that said, in fact, that the U.S. Constitution does protect LGBTQ employees. And this administration is not finished with its fight against the transgender community, against the gains of the LGBTQ community, against so many other people. But that we have seen in ways that we have found shocking and entirely unpredicted that we can have a national movement that works against all the progress that we've gained in the last 40 years or 50 years. The fight's not over. I think people felt that in Russia too. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the queer community in Russia had a great period of cultural openness. There were, organizations started, and cultural institutions stood up, and meeting places were opened, and people ate and lived and slept quite casually as openly LGBTQ people there, until the rise of Putin and populism and far-right autocracy. And that's really what's endangering all of our rights right now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We didn't even get to talk about any of your other films. I'm sorry about that. But How to Survive a Plague is also another amazing film. And your Showtime film, Soldier's Girl, that I have not seen that one. Mm-hmm. That one's on my list. And your website too. Your website is just, it's there's davidfrantz.com is your website. There's lots of information there. I did, we could have talked just about your activism and advocacy for the past 45 minutes easily. Thank you for telling the stories that you tell, David.
Well, you are doing such activism yourself and bringing these stories forward. And so thank you for giving me the platform.
Anytime, because you are your storytelling is incredible and very important, and I just encourage everybody to see this film. And I will make sure that I amplify this film, David, because in any way I can, just in my small community here, because it is an important film, and there is no way anybody could watch it and not feel something and want to be a part of the change. Especially to help what's happening in Chechnya.
I hope that that's true. We're asking people who see the film to announce that they know that this is going on, to use the hashtag #IamAWitness, and to really underscore and send out this message that we are all watching this, we all know this is happening, and we are going to raise our voices in unison to make sure that politically this never leaves the front stage.
I am a witness. Thank you so much, David. Remember, it's davidfrantz.com. You can find out all about David and his films and his book. And thank you for joining us again. And be sure to join us here on TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart every single week.